Welcome to Silent Queen's Reckoning. I'm so glad you could join us today. Now let's dive right into the story.
Chapter 1. Victoria Ashford heard her mother-in-law's voice before she saw the cameras. "Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made." The sentence cut through the hotel ballroom cleanly, sharp enough to stop a waiter with a tray of champagne halfway between tables. Victoria stood beneath the crystal chandelier of the Meridian Grand, one hand resting on the back of a chair, the other holding the black folder she had carried from her attorney's office. Around her, 200 guests turned to watch. Investors, society donors, board members, cousins who had never liked her, and journalists pretending to be lifestyle writers all leaned toward the spectacle. Eleanor Whitmore stood at the center of the ballroom, like a queen in pearls. She was 65, silver-haired, narrow-eyed, and elegant in the cold way of women who had spent decades turning money into moral authority. Her pale lavender gown shimmered under the lights. Her diamond brooch, a Whitmore family heirloom, sat over her heart as if the heart had ever been involved in her decisions. Beside her stood Victoria's husband, or almost ex-husband. Julian Whitmore wore a black tuxedo, his dark hair combed back, his jaw tight with the kind of discomfort men call tragedy when they are the ones causing it. His hand rested at the waist of Celeste Grant, his company's new public relations director, who wore emerald satin and a smile so soft it tried to look innocent. Celeste was beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed, delicate in a way that made powerful men feel heroic for protecting her. She was also pregnant, not visibly enough for strangers to know, but visibly enough for Eleanor to place one possessive hand near Celeste's shoulder and announce to everyone who mattered that the Whitmore future had already moved into a younger body. Victoria had been invited to the gala under a lie. The invitation said it was a charity benefit honoring the late Richard Whitmore, Julian's father. Victoria had loved Richard. He was the only person in the Whitmore family who treated her quiet nature as intelligence instead of deficiency. Before he died, he had told her that a family empire needed at least one person who could read numbers without worshipping them. So she came. She wore a simple black gown, her dark auburn hair pinned low, no jewelry except her wedding ring, and a pair of small diamond studs Richard had given her after she helped save the company from a debt spiral 3 years earlier. She had expected awkwardness. She had expected Eleanor's frost, Julian's avoidance, Celeste's careful sweetness. She had not expected a stage. A banner over the ballroom read, "Whitmore Legacy Gala New Beginnings for a Stronger Future." 5 minutes after Victoria arrived, Eleanor took the microphone and announced that Julian and Victoria's separation was a painful but necessary correction. Then she invited Julian and Celeste forward, praised Celeste's warmth, her loyalty, her natural gift for family, and hinted that the Whitmore line would soon be blessed again. The guests understood immediately. Then Eleanor saw Victoria by the side tables and smiled like a blade. "And since Victoria is here tonight," Eleanor said into the microphone, "perhaps we should be honest. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made." The room inhaled. Celeste lowered her eyes, but not before Victoria saw the flash of satisfaction. Julian whispered, "Mother." Not stop. Not apologize. Only mother, as if Eleanor had broken etiquette rather than his wife. Victoria looked at him. 8 years of marriage lived in that look. 8 years of building his confidence, smoothing his panic before board meetings, rewriting acquisition models after midnight, hosting investors who never learned which spouse had saved the deal. 8 years of Eleanor calling her reserved, plain, too career-minded, not maternal enough. 8 years of Julian saying he hated his mother's cruelty in private, then letting it stand in public because confronting it cost more courage than he wanted to spend. Victoria did not cry. That, more than anything, seemed to annoy Eleanor. "Nothing to say?" Eleanor asked, lowering the microphone but keeping her voice loud enough to carry. For once, a nervous laugh moved through one corner of the ballroom. Victoria closed the folder in her hand. "Not yet," she said. Eleanor's smile thinned. "Still performing dignity. How predictable." Celeste touched Julian's sleeve. "Maybe we should not do this tonight." Her voice was gentle. Her fingers stayed on Julian's arm. Victoria noticed both. Eleanor tilted her head. "No, dear. Some truths should be said in front of witnesses. My son spent years shrinking himself beside a woman who never gave him joy, never gave him children, never gave this family warmth. Now he has chosen better." The words landed one after another. Joy, children, warmth, better. Victoria felt each one, then set each one aside. She had learned that pain could be counted without being obeyed. Julian finally stepped forward. Victoria, this is not how I wanted tonight to go. How did you want it to go? His mouth tightened. She continued, quietly enough that the people nearest them leaned closer. Did you want me to stand in the back while your mother announced your pregnant mistress as the new future of the family? Celeste flinched at the word mistress. Eleanor snapped, do not use vulgar language because you have been replaced. Victoria looked at her mother-in-law. You are standing under a banner paid for with restricted foundation funds. The smile vanished. 5 minutes. That was all it took. Eleanor had humiliated Victoria in public, and 5 minutes later, Victoria gave the room its first reason to stop smiling. Julian's face changed. What did you say? Victoria opened the black folder. The gala invoice was routed through the Richard Whitmore Children's Foundation as donor development. The actual purpose, based on the program, guest list, and your mother's speech, appears to be a private family announcement and reputational transition event. The room went very still. Eleanor laughed, but it came too late. Do not be absurd. Victoria looked toward the front table, where 3 members of the foundation board sat frozen with wine glasses in hand. I have the invoices, she said, and the approval chain. Julian stepped closer, voice low. Victoria, stop. She looked at him. No, she said. That was your job 5 minutes ago. Chapter 2. Victoria had not come to the gala to start a war. She had come to end one quietly. For 6 months, Julian had been asking for patience while he figured things out. That was his phrase. It sounded humble. It was not. Figuring things out meant he slept in the townhouse guest suite when he wanted comfort, disappeared to the corporate apartment when he wanted Celeste, and expected Victoria to remain publicly calm because the company was in the middle of a major restructuring. Whitmore Global looked powerful from outside. It owned medical technology patents, logistics contracts, hospital supply subsidiaries, and a growing biotech investment arm. Its headquarters had glass elevators and marble floors. Its annual reports used words like resilience and innovation. Inside, it was held together by debt covenants, aging founders, and secrets. Richard Whitmore had known that before he died. 3 years earlier, when Julian's expansion into Eastern Europe nearly sank the company, Richard had called Victoria into his study and closed the door. My son has vision, he said, pale from illness but still sharp. Unfortunately, vision without restraint is just appetite with better lighting. Victoria had been 34 then, a former restructuring attorney who had left her law firm to help Julian stabilize the family business. She had believed she was becoming part of a family. Richard had known better. He asked her to review the debt. She found the hidden exposure in 3 days. She found a rescue path in 10. Through her own family office, Alderbrook Capital, she arranged a private financing structure under a neutral investment vehicle called Lydian Gate. The terms were strict but fair. Whitmore Global survived. Julian received public credit. Eleanor called it proof of Whitmore blood. Victoria said nothing. Richard knew. Before his death, he executed 2 documents. The first granted Lydian Gate enhanced conversion rights if Whitmore Global misused foundation funds, concealed executive conflicts, or engaged in reputational conduct likely to harm financing. The second appointed Victoria as protector of the Richard Whitmore Children's Foundation if family misconduct threatened its assets. He told her, you may never need these, but if Eleanor mistakes charity for family furniture, use them. Victoria had hoped she would never need them. Then Celeste happened. Celeste Grant entered Whitmore Global as a crisis communications consultant after a product recall. She was good at her job, or at least good at making Julian feel understood, while other people did the job. She stayed late. She praised his instincts. She laughed softly at his jokes. She called Victoria intimidating in a tone that made intimidation sound unfeminine. Eleanor adored her immediately. That girl has light, Eleanor told Victoria at Thanksgiving, while Celeste helped Julian carve the turkey in Victoria's kitchen. Some women make rooms warmer simply by entering them. Victoria had looked at the seating chart Celeste had rearranged without asking and said, some women move place cards. Julian called that unnecessary later. Now, in the Meridian Ballroom, all those tiny humiliations had matured into a public ceremony. Eleanor had expected Victoria to absorb it. That was the old bargain. Eleanor stabbed, Julian looked away, Victoria remained dignified, and the room concluded she felt less because she showed less. But Richard's documents were in the black folder. And the gala invoices were worse than Victoria had expected. The ballroom rental, floral design, celebrity photographer, donor program, Celeste's gown styling, and a private security detail had all been charged through the Foundation's donor development account. The same account meant to fund pediatric surgical access in rural hospitals. Eleanor did not merely humiliate Victoria. She billed it to sick children. That was why Victoria had stepped forward. Not for revenge. For records. Chapter 3. Eleanor tried to regain the room by laughing. Foundation events have donor components, Victoria. I know you enjoy paperwork, but not every invoice is a conspiracy. Victoria turned a page in the folder. Agreed. That is why I reviewed the guest list. The Foundation chair, a retired surgeon named Dr. Helena Morris, set down her glass. What guest list? Eleanor's eyes flicked toward her. Victoria answered. The donor list submitted to the Foundation included 78 qualified donors and hospital partners. The actual seating chart has 23. The remaining seats were assigned to Whitmore Family Contacts, Lifestyle Press, Celeste Grant's family, and 2 bridal designers. Celeste's face went pale. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Bridal designers. The phrase did what numbers alone could not. Julian looked at Celeste. What bridal designers? Celeste's mouth opened, then closed. Eleanor snapped. This is ridiculous. Celeste has been assisting with future Foundation branding. In a custom ivory reception dress? Victoria asked. Celeste looked as if she might faint. Julian's voice dropped. Celeste. For the first time, he sounded less defensive and more afraid. Victoria looked at him. You did not know. His silence answered. That surprised her. Not enough to soften the facts, but enough to note. Eleanor had moved faster than Julian understood. She was not only presenting Celeste as replacement. She was preparing a second wedding before the first marriage had legally ended. Victoria almost laughed. The arrogance was breathtaking. Grant Whitmore, Julian's younger cousin and the company's general counsel, hurried toward the group from the side entrance. His face was damp with panic. Aunt Eleanor, he whispered, we need to stop the program. Eleanor's eyes flashed. Not now. Now, Grant said, voice lower but urgent. The Foundation auditors just arrived. Victoria glanced toward the ballroom doors. 2 men and 1 woman in dark suits entered with hotel security. Behind them came Daniel Pierce, Victoria's attorney, and Marin Cole, a forensic accountant who had once described fraud as arrogance with a timestamp. Eleanor saw Daniel and understood too late. You planned this, she hissed. Victoria met her eyes. No. You scheduled it. Dr. Helena Morris stood from the Foundation table. Mrs. Whitmore, I want an explanation. Eleanor lifted her chin. You will have one after we remove this disruption. I meant from you. That was the second crack. The first had been the invoice. The second was the room realizing Eleanor did not command every adult inside it. Julian moved closer to Victoria. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at him. About which part? The invoices. The auditors. This. You told me to stop asking questions about Celeste. He flinched. You said I was making your life harder during a difficult transition. Victoria. So I stopped asking you. The sentence landed quietly. Worse than shouting. Celeste stepped forward, one hand on her stomach. I did not know about the Foundation account. Victoria looked at her. Did you know this event was intended to present you as Julian's future wife? Celeste's eyes filled. Answer carefully, Daniel Pierce said. Celeste looked from Daniel to Julian to Eleanor. For the first time, her softness looked less like power and more like a cage she had entered voluntarily before noticing the lock. Eleanor said the family needed clarity before the baby, Celeste whispered. The word baby spread through the guests like spilled ink. Julian closed his eyes. Victoria felt something inside her pull tight. The pregnancy was real then. Not a rumor. Not a hint. A child. An innocent life already being used as a Foundation centerpiece. Victoria turned back to Eleanor. You announced a pregnancy at a charity gala funded by a children's foundation without informing its board. Eleanor's voice shook with anger. That child is a Whitmore heir. That child is not a receipt. The room went silent. Celeste began crying. Julian looked at Victoria as if seeing her not as the wife he had neglected, but as the only person in the room still speaking about the baby like a human being. Eleanor looked as if she could strike her. Daniel Pierce stepped beside Victoria. Mrs. Ashford Whitmore has preserved the relevant records. We are requesting immediate suspension of discretionary Foundation spending pending review. Dr. Helena Morris nodded. Granted, subject to emergency board confirmation. Eleanor snapped. You cannot grant anything without a vote. Helena's expression hardened. Watch me call one. Chapter for the gala ended without dessert. That was how society knew something truly terrible had happened. Guests left in clusters, murmuring beneath chandeliers, taking with them half-finished champagne, photographs they would pretend not to have taken, and the kind of gossip that became moral opinion by morning. Foundation auditors secured the payment records. Hotel management provided vendor documents. The celebrity photographer surrendered memory cards after Daniel explained preservation obligations with frightening politeness. Celeste was escorted by her sister to a private room because she was shaking too hard to stand. Julian tried to follow Victoria. She did not let him. Outside the ballroom, in a marble corridor lined with mirrors, he caught her wrist. Not hard. Still enough. Victoria looked down at his hand. He released her immediately. I am sorry, he said. She studied him. Julian Whitmore had always been handsome in remorse. It was one of his most dangerous qualities. His gray eyes softened. His voice roughened. His shoulders lowered as if shame were a physical weight. In their early marriage, that look had undone Victoria more than once. Tonight, she noticed the shape of it without stepping inside. For what? She asked. He blinked. For tonight, he said. Which part? All of it. Too broad. Pain crossed his face. For my mother. For Celeste. For letting you be humiliated. You did not let me be humiliated. You invited me to the room where it was scheduled. His mouth tightened. I did not know she would say that. But you knew she would say something. He looked away. The answer was yes. Victoria nodded once. Thank you for being honest silently. That is not fair. No. It is accurate. He ran a hand through his hair. Celeste is pregnant. I heard. I did not plan it. Children rarely enjoy being described as accidents. He closed his eyes. She could see him trying to find a path through the conversation that left him wounded, but not responsible. Victoria, we have been separated emotionally for a long time. There it was. The phrase men discovered after the affair and before the lawyer. Were we emotionally separated when you asked me to rewrite the Street Bartholomew acquisition memo last month? She asked. That was business. Were we emotionally separated when you slept in my bed after the Zurich trip? His face flushed. Do not, he said softly. Do not what? Mention facts without your permission. He looked around the corridor, suddenly aware that Daniel stood several feet away and that hotel cameras watched from the ceiling. This is private, Julian said. Victoria almost smiled. Your mother used a microphone. He had no answer. She opened her folder and removed one envelope. These are preliminary marital separation terms. My attorney sent them to your counsel this afternoon. He stared at the envelope. You came prepared. I came hopeful. I prepared because I am not naive. That hurt him. She saw it. She did not apologize. Julian took the envelope slowly. Is there any chance we can discuss this without attorneys? No. Victoria, you protected your mother from discomfort while she made me a public obstacle to your new family. You protected Celeste from a sentence while she stood in my marriage. You protected yourself with vagueness. Attorneys are what I use when protection needs to include me. His eyes reddened. I loved you, he said. Victoria felt the old ache move through her. Not gone. Never gone that cleanly. I know, she said. Hope flickered. She finished. But you loved me most when I was useful. The hope died. Victoria walked away with Daniel beside her. Behind them, Julian stood beneath the corridor mirrors, holding the envelope like a man who had finally been handed the bill for a life he thought someone else was paying. Chapter 5 By morning, Eleanor's sentence was everywhere. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. Clips spread across social media, cut with footage of Victoria standing still in her black gown. Some people called her icy. Others called her iconic. A few asked whether anyone had checked the foundation records. Those were the people Victoria respected. At 8, the foundation board called an emergency meeting. At 9, Whitmore Global's stock dipped. At 10, Lydian Gate issued a formal notice of concern. Julian called Victoria 17 times. She answered none. At 11, Celeste sent a message. I need to speak with you. Please. I did not know Eleanor used foundation money. Victoria read it in her kitchen, while Daniel and Marin reviewed documents at the dining table. The townhouse felt too quiet without Julian, though his absence was less painful than the memory of how often he had been physically present and emotionally elsewhere. Marin looked up from her laptop. Mistress? Celeste. Pregnant mistress, Daniel corrected without looking up. Victoria set the phone down. She wants to talk. Daniel's expression sharpened. Do not meet her alone. I won't. Marin turned the laptop toward Victoria. Before you decide, you should see this. On the screen was a payment map. Foundation donor development funds had paid for the gala. That much they knew. But related charges extended further. Celeste's apartment staging, maternity wardrobe consulting, family announcement photography, reputation transition strategy, and a private prenatal concierge billed as pediatric partnership outreach. Victoria stared at the last line. They billed her prenatal concierge to the Children's Foundation? Marin nodded. Eleanor's assistant approved it. Daniel's mouth tightened. That is not merely ugly. That is legally useful. Victoria leaned back. For years, Eleanor had criticized her for not being maternal enough. Now Eleanor had used a foundation meant for vulnerable children to manage the public presentation of her son's affair pregnancy. The hypocrisy was almost too neat. Victoria picked up the phone. She replied to Celeste, "You may speak to my attorney. If you need independent counsel, Daniel can provide referrals." Celeste responded within 1 minute. "Please. I think Eleanor wants me to sign something." Victoria closed her eyes. Of course she did. Powerful families rarely stopped at one woman. They simply changed which woman they needed to control next. Chapter 6. Celeste arrived at Daniel Pierce's office at 3 in the afternoon wearing sunglasses and a camel coat too large for her frame. Victoria watched through the conference room glass as the younger woman removed the glasses with trembling hands. Without gala makeup and emerald satin, Celeste looked 27, frightened, and much less certain that being chosen had made her safe. Daniel had arranged for an independent attorney, Priya's son, to join them. Priya was precise, calm, and unimpressed by last names, which Victoria considered an essential qualification. Celeste sat across from Victoria and did not begin with excuses. That surprised her. "I was wrong," Celeste said. Her voice shook, but the words were clear. Victoria folded her hands. "Yes." Celeste flinched. "I believed him," she continued. "Julian said the marriage was over. Eleanor said you refused to let him go because you liked being Mrs. Whitmore. She said you never wanted children." Victoria's face did not move. Inside, a door slammed. Never wanted children. Another lie built from a private wound. Victoria and Julian had tried for 3 years. Quietly. Painfully. 2 miscarriages. 1 failed round of IVF. Dozens of appointments Julian missed because crisis always seemed to find him when grief needed him more. Eleanor knew only fragments and filled the rest with cruelty. Celeste looked at her hands. "I am sorry. I know saying that does not change what I did." "No," Victoria said. "It does not." Priya placed a document on the table. Ms. Grant brought the agreement Eleanor Whitmore asked her to sign. Daniel slid it toward Victoria. Victoria read the first page. Whitmore Family Maternal Support and Confidentiality Agreement. Generous apartment. Medical care. Trust provision for the child after birth. Confidentiality. Morality clause. Media cooperation. Consent to family-approved medical reporting. Custodial review rights if Celeste engaged in conduct deemed harmful to the Whitmore heir. There it was. The cage under the velvet cushion. Victoria pushed the document back toward Priya. "Do not let her sign this." Celeste's eyes filled. Eleanor said it protects the baby. "It protects access to the baby." Celeste covered her mouth. Victoria looked at her for a long moment. This woman had stood beside Julian while Eleanor humiliated her. She had enjoyed being chosen, perhaps even enjoyed Victoria's public displacement until the machinery turned toward her. Pity did not erase that. But it did not have to. "Celeste," Victoria said, "I am not your friend." Celeste nodded through tears. "I am not going to help you avoid accountability for what you did to me. I understand. But I will not let Eleanor use your child as a governance instrument if I can stop it." Celeste began to cry then, silently, the kind of crying that had no performance left in it. Priya touched her arm. "We will review your options." Victoria stood. Celeste looked up. "Did you ever want children?" Daniel's head lifted slightly. Victoria looked at the younger woman. She could have refused. She could have protected the wound. She had every right. Instead, she answered because lies about women grew in silence. "Yes," she said. "Very much." Celeste looked stricken. "Eleanor told me. Eleanor told you what made it easier to replace me." The words landed between them. Celeste whispered, "I am sorry." Victoria nodded once, not as forgiveness, but as receipt. Chapter 7. Eleanor Whitmore did not apologize. She summoned. The message came through Grant Whitmore, who sounded exhausted enough to be truthful. Aunt Eleanor wants a private family meeting at the estate. Victoria was in Daniel's office reviewing foundation charges. No. Grant sighed. That was my advice as well. Then why call? Because she said if you refuse, she will speak publicly. Victoria looked at Daniel. He raised an eyebrow. About what? She asked. Grant paused. Your miscarriages. The room went silent. Daniel's expression changed first. It became very still. Dangerous still. Victoria felt the air leave her body. For one moment, she was not in a law office. She was in a white clinic room, gripping Julian's hand after the first loss while he cried harder than she did. She was in their bathroom after the second, sitting on the floor with blood on a towel while Julian argued with a board member on the phone because he thought she could not hear. She was in Eleanor's dining room a month later, listening to her mother-in-law say that some women were not built for legacy. Victoria returned to the present slowly. Tell Eleanor, she said, that if she publicly discloses private medical information, I will pursue every legal remedy available. Grant's voice lowered. She thinks you won't, because it would make the losses public. Daniel leaned forward. Grant, this is Daniel Pierce. Tell Eleanor that if she attempts medical blackmail, I will seek an injunction, sanctions, and discovery into every communication she has had about Victoria's fertility, Celeste's pregnancy, and the foundation. Use those words. Grant exhaled. Understood. After the call ended, Victoria stood and walked to the window. The city outside was bright and indifferent. Marin, who had been quiet until then, said softly, I am sorry. Victoria nodded. She did not trust herself to speak yet. Daniel waited. Good lawyers knew when silence was evidence and when it was mercy. Finally, Victoria said, We need to move faster. Daniel's voice was careful. On which front? All of them. Chapter 8. The Foundation Board suspended Eleanor within 24 hours. Officially, it was temporary pending review. Everyone knew temporary meant the door had opened beneath her. The board appointed Victoria interim protector under Richard Whitmore's document. Eleanor challenged the validity immediately, claiming Richard had been ill, Victoria had undue influence, and the foundation had been manipulated by a bitter wife. That was a mistake. Challenging Richard's reasoning required opening the record of why he appointed Victoria. Marin prepared the files. 3 years of rescue documents. Evidence that Victoria identified debt exposure. Emails from Richard praising her judgment. Draft minutes showing Eleanor had proposed using foundation reserves to cover family office shortfalls before Victoria blocked it. A memo from Richard to Daniel Pierce stating, If Eleanor ever confuses charitable funds with family reputation management, Victoria must have authority to stop her. When Daniel read that sentence aloud, Victoria looked down at the table. Richard had seen the future more clearly than anyone else wanted to. The Whitmore Global Board hearing was scheduled for Friday. Julian requested a private meeting before it. Victoria refused twice. On the third request, he sent one sentence. I need to tell you the truth without asking you to fix it. She agreed to 20 minutes in Daniel's conference room. Julian arrived without Eleanor, without Celeste, without counsel in the room, though his attorney waited outside. He wore a gray suit and looked like he had not slept. His confidence, once his most attractive feature in public, had become thin at the edges. Victoria sat across from him. 20 minutes, she said. He nodded. Thank you. He looked at his hands for a moment. My mother told Celeste about the miscarriages. Victoria's face went cold. Not details, he said quickly. Enough. Enough to make Celeste believe you never wanted children, because wanting had hurt you. Enough to make her pity me. Victoria's voice was quiet. And you knew. His eyes filled. Not at first. Later? He closed his eyes. Yes. There it was. The truth without decorations. Victoria felt something inside her crack, not loudly, but permanently. I told myself correcting it would expose you, he said. I told myself silence protected your privacy. How convenient. I know. Do you? He opened his eyes. Yes. I let a lie protect my affair. The sentence sat between them. It was the first thing he had said that sounded like accountability rather than regret. Victoria leaned back. Why tell me now? Because my mother threatened to use it publicly, and I realized I had already used it privately by letting it stand. Her throat tightened. Julian continued. I am withdrawing from any challenge to Richard's foundation document. I will cooperate with the funding review. I will support Celeste getting independent counsel and medical privacy. Good. I am also stepping aside from the Street Bartholomew acquisition until the board completes conflict review. That surprised her. The acquisition was the future of Whitmore Global. It was also the deal Victoria had helped structure and Lydian Gate financed. Why? She asked. Because I cannot ask investors to trust my judgment while I am still learning how much of it was ego. That was a decent sentence. Late but decent. Victoria looked at him. Are you expecting praise? He shook his head. No. Forgiveness? No. Access? Pain crossed his face. I want it, but I am not asking for it. She studied him. The old Julian would have turned that into poetry. The current one seemed too tired to manipulate well, which was not the same as trustworthy. Celeste is pregnant, Victoria said. Yes. That child deserves support without being used to erase me. I know. If you allow Eleanor to do to Celeste what she did to me, you will be worse than weak. He nodded. I know that too. The 20 minutes ended. He stood. At the door he paused. I am sorry for the clinic days. Victoria's hand tightened around her pen. For missing appointments, he said. For taking calls. For letting you be the strong one because I was afraid grief would make me useless. She looked down. The apology reached a room inside her she had locked for years. It did not open the door, but it reached it. Goodbye, Julian, she said. He accepted the boundary and left. Chapter 9. The Whitmore Global Board hearing began with Eleanor trying to sit at the head of the table. Helena Morris, representing the foundation, stopped her. That seat is for the acting chair, Helena said. Eleanor's face tightened. I have sat there for 20 years. Not today. The room noticed. Victoria sat on the opposite side with Daniel, Marin, and Lydian Gate Counsel. Julian sat near the middle, not at the head, which did more to announce his fall than any public statement could have. Grant Whitmore looked like he had aged 5 years in a week. Celeste appeared by video with Priya beside her. She looked pale but composed. The acting chair, Malcolm Reed, opened the session. We are here to review potential misuse of foundation funds, executive conflicts, financing exposure, and governance implications. Eleanor's attorney began by attacking motive. Victoria was bitter. Victoria was humiliated. Victoria wanted revenge. Victoria had hidden her connection to Lydian Gate and manipulated Richard in his final illness. Daniel responded with documents. It took 40 minutes to dismantle the word bitter. Invoices, emails, approval chains, Richard's memo, Lydian Gate disclosures to independent counsel, Julian's conflict timeline, Celeste's proposed maternal agreement, Eleanor's messages instructing staff to make the gala feel like the family's new chapter, not another charity dinner. Then Marin presented the money. Foundation funds covered approximately $1.8 million in gala and related expenses with limited donor relevance. Additional charges totaling $640,000 appear tied to Ms. Grant's public presentation, housing transition, and prenatal concierge arrangements. A director muttered, "Good God." Eleanor's attorney said, these were strategic reputation expenses connected to donor confidence. Helena Morris looked at him. Donor confidence in whose uterus? The room went silent. Even Daniel blinked. Victoria did not smile, but it required discipline. Celeste looked down at her hands. Marin continued. The Foundation's Rural Surgical Access Program delayed 2 regional grants due to liquidity timing concerns during this same period. That sentence ended the last trace of elegance. 2 children's surgery grants had waited while Eleanor staged her son's replacement wife. Eleanor's face remained proud, but her hands clenched in her lap. Malcolm Reed turned to Julian. Did you authorize Foundation spending for the gala? Julian swallowed. No. Did you know the event would be used to announce Ms. Grant's pregnancy and your intended separation from Victoria? He looked at Victoria briefly, then back at Malcolm. I knew my mother wanted to present Celeste publicly. I did not know the full program. Did you stop it? Julian closed his eyes for 1 second. No. Why? His answer came quietly. Because stopping my mother would have required admitting I had built the situation she was exploiting. No one spoke. It was not a defense. That made it powerful. Eleanor stared at him like betrayal had finally become hereditary. Malcolm turned to Celeste. Ms. Grant, did you believe the event was a Foundation gala? Celeste's voice trembled. At first, yes. Later, Eleanor told me it was important for the family to see me before the baby became public. She said Victoria would understand if she had any dignity. Eleanor snapped, ungrateful girl. Priya leaned toward the camera. My client will not be addressed that way. Victoria watched Eleanor look around for an ally and find only witnesses. The vote came after 2 hours. Eleanor was removed from all foundation authority and barred from discretionary spending approval. The board referred the matter to external counsel for recovery. Whitmore Global established an independent governance committee. Julian was placed under temporary executive oversight. Lydian Gates' enhanced rights were acknowledged. Victoria was confirmed as protector of the foundation. Eleanor said nothing when the decision was read. Her silence was not dignity. It was the absence of available power. Chapter 10. The headlines were brutal. Whitmore matriarch removed from Children's Foundation after gala funding scandal. Pregnant mistress presentation charged to charity account. Wife humiliated at gala now controls foundation review. Victoria hated that last one. Not because it was false. Because it reduced the issue to a personal reversal when the true wound was institutional. Children had lost time. Staff had been pressured. A foundation had been treated as a wardrobe budget for family succession theater. She gave one statement. The Richard Whitmore Children's Foundation exists to serve children, not family image. The review will focus on recovering funds, restoring grants, and protecting the foundation from future misuse. Private family matters will be handled privately and legally. It was not flashy. It worked. Donors returned. 2 hospitals received delayed grants. Eleanor retreated to the Whitmore estate and refused all calls except from attorneys and, occasionally, Julian. Celeste moved out of the company apartment into a smaller place her attorney arranged. Julian established support through a formal agreement. He attended prenatal appointments only when invited. To Victoria's surprise, he followed the boundaries. Following boundaries did not make him noble. It made him less dangerous. The divorce moved forward. Julian did not contest the main terms. He wanted the townhouse. Victoria refused. The townhouse had been purchased through her premarital trust and restored with her funds. Julian asked for their lake house instead. She agreed. It had more of him in it than her anyway. During mediation, he looked at her across the long table and said, "You are being fair." Victoria replied, "Do not confuse clean terms with softness." His mouth curved sadly. "I won't." After the session, Daniel asked whether she was all right. Victoria looked at the signed preliminary agreement. "I am efficient." "That was not my question." She sighed. "No, but efficient is currently available." He nodded. "Available is fine for today." That night, Victoria returned to the townhouse alone. The rooms felt enormous. She made tea in the kitchen where Julian used to stand barefoot reading market updates. She passed the guest room where he had slept during the months he called their marriage complicated. She entered the small room they had once painted pale yellow after the first pregnancy test. They had repainted it gray after the second loss. Victoria stood in the doorway for a long time. Then she walked inside, opened the window, and let cold air into a room that had held too much unsaid. Chapter 11. Eleanor came to the townhouse in late winter. She did not call first. The security desk did. "Mrs. Whitmore is downstairs," the guard said. "She says she will wait." Victoria almost said no. Then she thought of Richard, of the foundation now functioning again, of the divorce papers nearly complete, of Celeste's pregnancy entering its final months, and of the fact that some doors could be opened without becoming entrances. "Send her to the front sitting room," Victoria said. "Requaras usual." Eleanor entered wearing black wool and no brooch. That detail mattered. She looked older without the family diamonds. Still elegant. Still formidable. But less certain that the world would rearrange itself before her. Victoria stood by the fireplace. "Eleanor." "Victoria." "No, dear." "Progress, perhaps." Eleanor looked around the room. "You changed the curtains." "Yes. The old ones were better. You may include that in your memoir." Eleanor's mouth tightened. Then, unexpectedly, she almost smiled. Almost. She sat only after Victoria gestured. "I am not here to fight," Eleanor said. "Why are you here?" The older woman removed her gloves slowly. Her hands looked thin. Human annoyingly. "Celeste is due in 6 weeks." "I know. She will not speak to me." "That seems healthy." Eleanor accepted the blow with a slight tilt of her head. "Julian barely speaks to me." Victoria did not answer. Eleanor looked toward the window. "For years, I thought the family survived because I was willing to do what softer people could not. Cut away weakness. Manage optics. Protect the name. You protected control." "Yes," Eleanor said. The admission was quiet. Victoria studied her. Eleanor continued. Richard used to say you understood stewardship better than blood. I thought he was infatuated with your competence. That sounds like him. It irritated me. That sounds like you. Another almost smile. Then it faded. I was wrong to say what I said at the gala. Victoria remained still. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she forced the rest out. Leaving you was not the best decision Julian ever made. It may have been one of his most expensive lessons. That is not an apology. I know. The room held the silence. Eleanor looked at her directly. I am sorry I said it. Victoria let the words arrive. They did not heal the wound. But they entered the record. I am sorry I used your losses, Eleanor said, voice lower now. I convinced myself that because you survived them quietly, they were not as deep. Victoria felt the old pain stir. No, she said. You convinced yourself my pain was useful. Eleanor closed her eyes. Yes. For once, there was nothing elegant in her face. Victoria walked to the tea table and poured water into a cup. Not for Eleanor. For herself. Her hand was steady because she had spent years learning steadiness, and because steadiness belonged to her now, not to the Whitmores. Eleanor stood. I will not ask you to forgive me. Good. I would like to support the foundation privately. Through the board. Of course. With restrictions. Eleanor's mouth tightened again. Of course. At the door she paused. Richard chose well. Victoria looked at her. The sentence cost Eleanor more than the apology. Yes, Victoria said. He did. Eleanor left. Victoria sat alone afterward, tea cooling in her hands. Forgiveness did not arrive. Relief did, small and unannounced. For that day it was enough. Chapter 12. Celeste's son was born in April. A boy. Samuel Grant. Not Whitmore. At least, not yet. Celeste made that decision after months of legal counsel, therapy, and enough distance from Eleanor to remember she had a surname of her own. Julian accepted it publicly. Privately, Victoria heard from Daniel that Eleanor nearly dismissed 3 nurses with her tone alone. Victoria sent a gift through the foundation office. Not jewelry. Not silver. A set of children's books and a donation to the rural surgical program in Samuel's name. Celeste sent a handwritten note. Thank you for seeing him as a child before the rest of us learned how. Victoria kept the note in a drawer. Not with sacred things. With evidence of possible change. The divorce finalized in June. Julian arrived at the courthouse in a navy suit. Victoria wore ivory. They signed where instructed. The judge reviewed the terms, asked the standard questions, and ended 8 years of marriage in less than 20 minutes. Outside the courtroom, Julian stood beside her near a window. Do you feel free? He asked. Victoria considered lying. Not yet, she said. He looked at her. But I feel unbound. He nodded slowly. That sounds like you. It sounds like someone learning. I am trying to do that too. Good. He hesitated. I am stepping down as CEO. That surprised her, though she did not show it. The board recommended? Yes. But I agreed before they forced it. Why? He looked out the window at the courthouse steps. Because I have been confusing leadership with being protected from consequences. I do not know how to lead cleanly yet. Victoria studied him. That was not a sentence the old Julian could have survived saying. What will you do? Advisory role during transition. Parenting classes. Therapy. Probably disappoint my mother recreationally. Victoria almost smiled. He saw it, and for one moment they were 2 people who had once known how to stand near each other without breaking anything. I am sorry, he said. I know. Do you forgive me? She looked at him. The man she loved. The man who failed her. The father of another woman's child. The son of a woman who had turned Victoria's grief into leverage. The executive learning late that humility was not humiliation. Some days I think I will, she said. Some days I do not want to. I am letting both be true. His eyes reddened. That is fair. No, she said softly. It is honest. Fair is harder. He nodded. They left separately. That mattered. Chapter 13. 1 year after the gala, Victoria stood in the renovated west wing of the Richard Whitmore Children's Foundation and watched a little girl choose a purple crayon. The new wing served families traveling for pediatric surgery. It had sleep rooms, counseling offices, play spaces, and legal aid support for parents navigating medical debt. The delayed grants had not only been restored, they had doubled. Marin called it the most satisfying forensic recovery of her career. Daniel called it governance repair. Victoria called it the only acceptable use of anger. The dedication ceremony was smaller than Eleanor would have made it. No celebrity photographer. No floral budget large enough to fund a clinic. No family announcement hidden inside philanthropy. Just doctors, nurses, families, trustees, and donors who had learned the foundation now preferred clean books to dramatic speeches. Victoria spoke for 3 minutes. "This foundation was created for children," she said. "That sounds obvious. It should have remained obvious. When institutions drift, they often do so behind beautiful language. Legacy, family, reputation, tradition. Tonight, we recommit to simpler words. Care, access, records, accountability." She looked at the families seated in the front row. No child should wait because adults wanted a prettier story. The applause was quiet but deep. Afterward, Helena Morris found her near the playroom. "Richard would be proud," Helena said. Victoria looked at the children drawing at the table. "He would ask whether the operating reserves are sufficient." "Also true." They smiled. Across the room, Julian stood holding Samuel, now 8 months old, while Celeste adjusted the baby's sweater. Eleanor stood several feet away, not interfering. That distance was its own discipline. Julian caught Victoria's eye and nodded. Not as husband. Not as plea. As acknowledgement. Victoria nodded back. Then she turned toward the playroom, where a little boy had drawn the chandelier from the Meridian Grand in bright yellow crayon without knowing what had happened beneath it. Children did that. They took the shapes adults ruined and filled them with new color. Victoria felt something in her chest loosen. Chapter 14. The townhouse changed slowly. Victoria did not redecorate in a frenzy. She did not burn Julian's letters or sell every chair he had chosen. She had learned that healing performed for imaginary witnesses was still performance. Instead, she changed what asked to be changed. The guest suite became a reading room. The gray room became a music room, though she did not play anything well at first. She bought a second-hand piano and took lessons from a patient teacher named Elise, who clapped when Victoria managed 3 measures without apologizing. "You do not need to apologize to the piano," Elise said. "I apologize to most furniture. We will work on that." Victoria laughed more that year than she expected. Not loudly, not constantly, but enough to surprise herself. She also cried more than strangers would have guessed. Sometimes over obvious things. The miscarriages, the divorce, the memory of Eleanor's sentence under the chandelier. Sometimes over absurd things. Julian's old coffee mug, a baby blanket advertisement, the smell of cedar in a closet. Pain, once no longer needed for survival, became less orderly. She let it. The foundation became her main work, but not her whole life. That distinction mattered. She joined boards that had nothing to do with the Whitmores. She traveled without telling anyone when she would return. She bought a green coat because she liked it, not because it communicated restraint. On the 2nd anniversary of the gala, Daniel invited her to dinner. Not a working dinner. He made that clear 3 times, which was how she knew he was nervous. Victoria said yes. It was not a grand romance. Not at first. It was 2 people who understood documents, trauma, and the erotic charge of someone respecting a boundary without sulking. He asked before touching her hand. He did not ask about forgiveness as if it were a trophy. He knew quiet could mean thought, not absence. Victoria liked him. That scared her. She told him so on their 5th dinner. Daniel nodded. "That seems reasonable. You are not supposed to agree. Would you prefer I call you cold and emotionally unavailable?" "No." "Then reasonable." She smiled. Love, she was learning, did not need to arrive like rescue. Sometimes it arrived like a chair pulled out without expectation that she sit. Chapter 15. Eleanor's health declined in the 3rd winter. Not dramatically. Eleanor would have considered that vulgar. Her heart weakened. Her steps slowed. She accepted a cane after rejecting 3 designs for being ugly. Julian called Victoria to tell her, because he thought she should know. "Do you want to see her?" he asked. Victoria sat in her office at the foundation, looking at a grant proposal for neonatal transport equipment. "Does she want to see me?" she asked. That was different. Victoria visited the Whitmore estate on a clear, cold afternoon. The house looked smaller than she remembered, though nothing about it had changed except her fear of it. Eleanor sat in the sunroom wrapped in a cashmere shawl. No pearls. No brooch. A book unopened in her lap. "Victoria," she said. "Eleanor. You look well. So do you." Eleanor gave her a look. "Do not become dishonest out of politeness. You look imperious in a shawl." "Better." Victoria sat. For a while, they discussed the foundation. Eleanor had become a donor through proper channels, anonymous at first, then publicly only after the board approved. She had never regained authority. To her credit, she stopped trying. Eventually, Eleanor said, "Samuel is walking. I heard. He knocks things over with great confidence. Very Whitmore." Victoria smiled faintly. Eleanor looked out at the winter garden. "I used to think grandchildren were proof that a family had continued. And now I think they are proof that a family has another chance not to repeat itself." Victoria absorbed that. It was the kind of sentence Eleanor would once have mocked as sentimental if someone else said it. Eleanor turned back. "I owe you something. Another apology?" "No. Those become self-indulgent if repeated too often." "Agreed." Eleanor reached for an envelope on the table and held it out. Victoria took it, but did not open it. "What is this?" "A letter Richard wrote and left with me. He instructed me to give it to you if I ever found myself unable to understand why he trusted you." Victoria looked at the envelope. Her name was written in Richard's hand. "You kept it for years. I resented it for years. And now?" Eleanor's mouth tightened. "Now I am tired of resenting dead men for being right." Victoria almost laughed. That, unexpectedly, was the closest thing to peace they had ever shared. She opened the letter later at home. "Victoria, if Eleanor gives you this, it means she has finally discovered what I knew, that strength without cruelty is not weakness. I hope my family deserves your stewardship. If they do not, I hope you choose the children anyway. They are the only future that matters." Richard. Victoria folded the letter carefully and sat with it until evening filled the room. She did choose the children, but she had also chosen herself. That was the part Richard, kind as he was, had not needed to ask. Chapter 16. 5 years after the Meridian Grand Gala, the video still existed online. It surfaced occasionally when people made compilations about public revenge, powerful wives, or rich family scandals. There was Eleanor in lavender, saying the sentence. There was Victoria in black, still as stone. There was the moment 5 minutes later when foundation fraud entered the room, and everyone's face changed. Strangers loved the clip. Victoria rarely watched it. Not because it hurt too much now. Because it was incomplete. It did not show the clinic rooms. It did not show the invoices. It did not show Celeste crying over the maternal agreement. It did not show Julian admitting he had let lies protect his affair. It did not show Eleanor in the sunroom, old and stubborn, learning too late that control was a poor substitute for care. It did not show Victoria in the gray room, learning piano one wrong note at a time. Most of all, it did not show the children. Samuel running through the foundation hallway with a toy ambulance. Rural families sleeping in the new wing. Mothers receiving travel grants. A little girl drawing chandeliers in yellow crayon. Babies who would never know their surgeries were delayed because one woman once thought reputation mattered more than records. On the 5th anniversary, the foundation board held its annual meeting. Victoria was chair now. Daniel sat in the back, no longer her attorney in active crisis, now her partner in the quiet, complicated, tender sense of the word. Julian attended as a donor representative and Samuel's father. Celeste served on an advisory committee for parent privacy. Eleanor was gone by then, buried beside Richard under a stone that listed her name without adjectives. The meeting ended with a report showing surgical access grants had tripled. Victoria stood at the window afterward, looking down at the city. Julian approached, but kept a respectful distance. She would have been proud, he said. Victoria did not ask who. Eleanor, perhaps. Richard, certainly. Maybe both. She would have criticized the font on the annual report, Victoria said. Julian smiled. Also true. They stood quietly. Then he said, "Thank you for not letting my worst choices define Samuel's access to you." Victoria looked at him. "He deserves adults who can stand in the same room," she said. "I know. And you have done the work." The words surprised him. They surprised her too, but they were true. Julian's eyes softened. "That means more than I expected. Do not make it dramatic." "I will try." He left her by the window. Daniel joined her a moment later and handed her coffee. "You survived the annual report," he said. "Barely. The font was questionable." Eleanor would agree. Victoria laughed. The sound moved through the room easily. Chapter 17. That evening, Victoria returned to the Meridian Grand. Not for a gala. For a small foundation dinner honoring hospital coordinators. The ballroom had been renovated. The chandelier remained. The carpet was different. The stage was smaller. No banner about new beginnings hung over the room. Victoria appreciated that restraint. Before guests arrived, she stood alone near the place where Eleanor had once held the microphone. For a moment, memory overlaid the room. Lavender silk. Emerald satin. Julian's hand at Celeste's waist. Eleanor's voice. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. Victoria waited for the old pain. It came, but softly. Like a letter from a country she no longer lived in. She looked up at the chandelier. 5 minutes after that sentence, she had opened a folder and changed the room. But years later, she understood the true reversal had not been public. It had been internal. She stopped accepting other people's definitions of dignity. Dignity was not silence. It was not enduring insult, so no one else felt awkward. It was not looking composed while being erased. Dignity was the right to name harm, preserve evidence, protect what mattered, and still refuse to become cruel in the shape of those who hurt you. Daniel entered quietly and stood beside her. You okay? Yes. Real yes. She smiled. Real yes. The doors opened. Hospital coordinators entered with name tags and tired smiles. Nurses laughed near the registration table. A pediatric surgeon complained that the coffee was too weak. The ballroom filled with people who had come for children, not spectacle. Victoria watched the room become useful. That was the healing. Not forgetting what happened. Changing what the room was for. Chapter 18. At the end of the dinner, Victoria gave no speech about betrayal. She spoke about transport grants, hospital lodging, rural access, and foundation accountability. She thanked coordinators by name. She announced a new privacy fund for expectant mothers facing family pressure during medical crises. She did not mention Eleanor, Julian, Celeste, or the old scandal. She did not need to. Her life was not a courtroom exhibit anymore. After the dinner, a young woman approached her near the exit. She wore a volunteer badge and held a stack of programs against her chest. Mrs. Ashford? She asked. Victoria is fine. The young woman looked nervous. I saw the old video. Victoria waited. I'm sorry. I know that is probably strange to say. It is all right. I just wanted to tell you that I watched it after my fiancé's mother told me I was lucky he still wanted me. I remember how you stood there. I thought calm meant you were not hurt. Then I read about what you did after, and I realized calm can be what you use to get out. Victoria felt the sentence settle somewhere deep. Yes, she said. Sometimes. I left, the young woman said. Not that night, but later. With documents. Victoria smiled gently. Good. The volunteer's eyes filled. Thank you. Victoria did not say she was welcome. The woman's courage belonged to herself. Instead, she said, keep your records somewhere safe. The young woman laughed through tears. I do. When she left, Daniel touched Victoria's shoulder. That was something. Victoria nodded. It was something. Years ago, a room had watched her be humiliated and waited to see whether she would break. Now another woman had watched the record of that humiliation and found a door. That did not make the pain worth it. Pain did not need to be justified to become useful. It only needed not to be wasted. Chapter 19. Victoria went home late. The townhouse lights came on as she entered. The reading room smelled faintly of cedar and paper. The music room door stood open, piano waiting in the dimness. On the mantel sat Richard's letter in a silver frame, not displayed for guests but present enough to remind her that someone had seen her clearly before she had fully seen herself. She took off her earrings, set down her bag, and walked to the music room. At the piano, she played the piece she had been practicing for months. Slowly, imperfectly, without apology, the final note lingered. Victoria sat in the quiet afterward. For years, quiet had been demanded of her. Quiet at dinners when Eleanor cut. Quiet in clinics because grief made other people uncomfortable. Quiet in boardrooms because Julian needed to appear decisive. Quiet at the gala because a dignified woman was supposed to bleed inward. Now quiet was different. It belonged to her. It was the sound of a locked door she controlled. A house chosen for herself. A foundation repaired. A life no longer organized around becoming easy for the people who hurt her. She thought of Eleanor's sentence one last time. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. Perhaps, in a way Eleanor never intended, it had been true. Leaving Victoria forced Julian to face the weakness he had hidden behind women. It forced Celeste to protect herself and her child. It forced Eleanor's empire of image to meet records. It forced the foundation back to its purpose. And it forced Victoria to stop confusing being chosen with being valued. She closed the piano lid gently. The best decision was not his leaving. It was her refusing to disappear afterward. Chapter 20. Eleanor's last public attack did not come from a ballroom. It came from a hospital corridor. Celeste went into labor 3 weeks early during a rainstorm that flooded half the city streets and turned every taxi ride into a negotiation. Julian was in a governance meeting when Priya called him. Victoria knew because he left the meeting so quickly that the board secretary wrote emergency personal matter in the minutes. By then, Victoria had no official reason to be involved. That was what she told herself for 12 minutes. Then Daniel forwarded her the message from Priya. Eleanor is at the hospital with a photographer. Victoria stood from her desk. The foundation offices were quiet except for the sound of rain against the windows. On her screen sat a grant proposal for maternal transport services in rural counties. She looked at the words maternal privacy support and felt the past move with grim efficiency into the present. Daniel, she said, meet me downstairs. He did not ask why. At St. Catherine's Medical Center, the maternity floor looked like every expensive hospital floor built for wealthy fear. Pale wood, soft lamps, private doors, nurses trained to be calm around panic. At the end of the corridor, Eleanor stood in a navy coat, one hand gripping her cane, the other holding a phone. Beside her was a photographer Victoria recognized from society pages. Priya stood between them and Celeste's room. Mrs. Whitmore, Priya said, voice controlled, my client does not consent to photographs. Eleanor's face was white with fury. That baby is a Whitmore. That baby is not a press release. Victoria spoke from behind her. Everyone turned. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You have no place here. Victoria walked toward them, rein still on the shoulders of her coat. Neither does a photographer. The photographer began backing away. Eleanor snapped, stay. He did not. Daniel stepped aside to let him pass, then said pleasantly, my office will send a preservation letter regarding any images already taken. The photographer disappeared into the elevator. Eleanor's hand shook on her cane. You think you can insert yourself into every room in this family? Victoria stopped in front of her. No, only the rooms where women are being cornered. Celeste is carrying my grandson. Celeste is giving birth. Eleanor's mouth tightened. You always choose language that makes me sound cruel. I choose language that makes the subject human. Priya looked relieved enough to sit down but did not. From inside the room, Celeste cried out. Julian's voice followed, low and urgent. A nurse opened the door, saw the gathering, and frowned. We need quiet out here, the nurse said. Victoria looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked back. For one moment, the old matriarch seemed ready to fight the entire hospital system for the right to control a newborn's first photograph. Then another sound came from inside the room, raw and frightened, and something in Eleanor faltered. Not softened. Faltered. She lowered herself into a chair. I only wanted him recognized, she said. Victoria stood beside the wall. Recognition without consent is possession. Eleanor did not answer. They waited for 2 hours. No one spoke much. Daniel got coffee. Priya reviewed messages. Eleanor stared at the closed door. Victoria watched the corridor and thought about every woman who had given birth under someone else's agenda. A husband wanting proof. A mother-in-law wanting access. A family wanting names and photos before the person in the bed had slept. At 2:17 p.m., a baby cried. Eleanor closed her eyes. Victoria looked toward the door. Julian came out 20 minutes later wearing a hospital gown cover, his hair disordered, his face wet. He looked first at Victoria, then at his mother. A boy, he said. Samuel. Eleanor stood too quickly and nearly lost balance. Daniel moved, but she steadied herself on the cane. Can I see him? Eleanor asked. Julian's face changed. Not cruelly. Carefully. Not yet, he said. The words landed like a verdict. Eleanor stared at him. Julian swallowed. Celeste is exhausted. The baby is healthy but early. No visitors today. I am not a visitor. Today, Julian said, voice shaking but firm. Everyone is. Victoria looked away so he would not see her pride. Eleanor sat back down slowly. For the first time in Victoria's memory, Julian had chosen a boundary before a crisis forced him to. It did not erase the past. It changed the next 5 minutes. Sometimes that was where repair began. Chapter 21. 2 days after Samuel's birth, Eleanor tried again. She sent a draft birth announcement to Julian, Celeste, Priya, and 3 family office staff. It named the baby Samuel Richard Whitmore, described him as the first son of Julian Whitmore and Celeste Grant, and included a line about the continuation of the Whitmore legacy after a period of personal transition. Celeste forwarded it to Priya with one sentence. I do not consent. Priya forwarded it to Daniel because the announcement referenced the Foundation's maternal health initiative. Daniel forwarded it to Victoria because, as he wrote, Eleanor continues to believe commas can launder coercion. Victoria read the draft twice. Then she called Julian. He answered immediately. I did not approve it, he said. I know. Celeste is crying. My mother says she is being ungrateful. Victoria closed her eyes. Where are you? At the hospital. Then stay with Celeste. Let Priya handle your mother. There was a pause. Why are you helping us? Julian asked. The question sounded tired, not accusatory. Victoria looked around her office. On one wall hung a photograph from the reopened Rural Surgery Grant Program. A little boy in a hospital gown giving 2 thumbs up. His mother stood behind him with both hands over her mouth, crying. I am helping set a rule, Victoria said. Children are not announcements. Julian was quiet. Thank you, he said. Do not thank me. Enforce it. He did. For the first time, Julian issued a statement without Eleanor's edits. Celeste Grant and Julian Whitmore are grateful to welcome Samuel Grant. Mother and child are safe. No photographs or additional details will be shared. The family requests privacy. No Whitmore surname. No legacy. No transition. Eleanor called it humiliating. The public called it tasteful. Celeste called it the first full breath she had taken since the gala. The next morning, Victoria received a package at the townhouse. Inside was a small white blanket, and used, still folded. A note from Celeste rested on top. Eleanor ordered this embroidered with the Whitmore crest. I cannot use it. I thought you might know what to do with things made for control. Victoria unfolded the blanket. The crest sat in silver thread near one corner. Beautiful. Expensive. Wrong. She sent it to the Foundation's textile program, where donated fabrics were repurposed into comfort quilts for families staying in the surgical wing. The crest was removed. The cloth became part of something warmer, less impressive, and infinitely more useful. When Celeste heard, she sent one word. Good. Chapter 22. Eleanor's formal removal from the family office took longer than her removal from the Foundation. That was where the real money lived. The family office controlled trusts, property, investments, and enough quiet payments to make loyalty look like affection. Eleanor had run it as an extension of her will for 30 years. Staff anticipated her preferences before she voiced them. Lawyers wrote memos with her temper in mind. Accountants learned which categories could be stretched when reputation required elegance. After the Foundation scandal, Lydian Gate demanded a family office audit because certain accounts overlapped with corporate stability representations. The Whitmore family called it aggressive. Victoria called it overdue. The audit found smaller things first. Travel expenses billed to philanthropic review. Consultants paid for donor strategy, who had actually coordinated society seating. Private security assigned to monitor Victoria's movements during the separation, misclassified as executive risk. Then Marin found the larger file. Medical narratives. Victoria did not understand at first. The folder title was bland, buried inside reputation planning. When Marin opened it, the room went quiet. There were notes prepared for potential press use if Victoria challenged the separation publicly. Lines about her long-standing emotional withdrawal. Lines about fertility-related strain. Lines about Julian desiring family life after years of disappointment. Lines about Eleanor supporting all women involved with compassion. Victoria read the page until the words blurred. Daniel moved to close the file. No, she said. Her voice did not sound like her own. She read every line. Not because she needed more pain. Because someone had turned her miscarriages into draft messaging, and she refused to let the ugliness hide behind her inability to look. Marin's face was pale with anger. This was never released. It was prepared. Yes. Daniel said quietly. This supports punitive claims. Victoria looked at the page. For years, she had protected those losses like fragile glass. She had told almost no one. She had let Eleanor's hints pass in silence because public correction required public wound. Meanwhile, the family office had prepared to weaponize the wound if she became inconvenient. Something inside her went still. Use it, she said. Daniel watched her carefully. In court? In the family office removal petition. Under seal where possible. But use it. Are you sure? Victoria folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. I am tired of privacy, meaning only they get to decide what remains hidden. The petition was filed under seal, but its result was not. Eleanor Whitmore was removed from operational control of the Whitmore family office pending full review. Independent trustees assumed authority. Misclassified expenses were referred for recovery. Any personal monitoring of family members was prohibited. Medical or reproductive information could not be collected, stored, discussed, or used in planning without explicit consent. The last rule became known among staff as Victoria's Clause. Eleanor hated that. Victoria slept better after it passed. Not well. Better. Chapter 23. Julian stepped down from Whitmore Global in September. The announcement was calm and bloodless. Julian Whitmore will transition from Chief Executive Officer to non-executive family shareholder and strategic advisor during a governance renewal period. Business language had a way of turning collapse into furniture. Victoria attended the board session because Lydian Gate required her presence. Julian sat across the table, hands folded, face composed. The new CEO, a woman named Serena Holt, had run a medical logistics company without scandal for 12 years, which made her almost exotic in Whitmore circles. Serena presented a 90-day stabilization plan. No one interrupted her. That alone felt revolutionary. After the meeting, Julian found Victoria near the elevators. "Serena is good," he said. "Yes. Better than I was." Victoria looked at him. He gave a faint smile. "I am practicing saying true things without collapsing." "How is that going?" "Unevenly." She almost smiled. The elevator did not come. They stood in a hallway where, years earlier, Victoria had waited outside meetings Julian took credit for. The memory no longer burned. It simply existed. Julian said, "I signed the medical privacy clause." "I heard. I should have protected that without a clause." "Yes. I know." The elevator arrived. Neither entered. He continued, "Samuel smiled yesterday. Celeste sent me a picture. I wanted to send it to my mother, then I remembered she would forward it to 3 people and call it pride." Victoria gave him a wry look. "Restraint looks good on you. Feels terrible. It often does at first." He laughed softly. Then his face grew serious. "Do you ever think about the child we almost had?" The hallway changed. Victoria looked down. The question was not cruel. That made it harder. "Yes," she said. "I do too." For a moment, they stood with the ghosts that had never been allowed into public rooms. Not as weapons, not as blame, as grief, finally named by both people who had carried it badly. Julian's voice roughened. "I am sorry I left you alone with that grief." Victoria felt tears rise and did not fight them completely. "I am sorry I pretended I did not need you," she said. He closed his eyes. It was not reconciliation. It was something quieter and in some ways more difficult. Shared mourning without ownership. When the next elevator arrived, Victoria stepped inside. Julian did not follow. That too was growth. Chapter 24. The Maternal Privacy Fund began in a former storage room. Victoria chose the space herself. It was on the foundation's 2nd floor, near the family lodging wing, with 2 windows facing a courtyard. The room had once held extra banquet chairs from the old days when the foundation spent too much money on donor dinners and not enough on transport vans. The symbolism pleased Marin. "From banquet chairs to legal aid," she said. "Very elegant." Victoria looked at the dust on the floor. "Very dusty." They renovated it into a small legal clinic for pregnant women facing pressure from partners, employers, in-laws, or wealthy families. The services were practical: medical privacy forms, hospital visitor directives, custody risk consultations, financial coercion screening, emergency communication plans. Victoria insisted on one rule above all. No woman had to tell her whole story to receive the first appointment. "People in crisis should not have to perform pain for entry," she said. The staff wrote that down. The first client was not famous. She was a nurse whose fiancé's parents wanted her to sign a prenatal agreement, giving them decision rights over the baby if she returned to night shifts. The second was a graduate student whose boyfriend threatened to tell her department chair she was unstable if she kept the pregnancy. The third was a hotel manager whose mother-in-law had booked a photographer for the delivery room without asking. Victoria read the anonymized reports weekly. Each one made Eleanor's old behavior seem less like a singular cruelty and more like a polished version of a common disease. Control often called it self-care. That became the fund's first training title. Celeste joined the advisory committee 6 months after Samuel's birth. She was nervous at the first meeting, wearing a plain navy dress and no jewelry. Samuel's photo was tucked inside her notebook, not displayed. When asked why she wanted to serve, she looked at Victoria before answering. Because I know what it is like to confuse being protected with being managed, Celeste said. And because someone I hurt still told me to get my own lawyer. The room went quiet. Victoria did not rescue her from the discomfort. Celeste sat in it. That was good. After the meeting, Celeste approached. Was that too much? No. I did not want to make myself look noble. You didn't. Celeste winced, then laughed softly. Still precise. Still useful. For the first time, they shared something almost like ease. Not friendship. Not erasure. Just two women standing in a room built partly from the consequences of one man's cowardice and one older woman's control, deciding the room would now serve someone else. Chapter 25. Daniel proposed without an audience. That was one of the reasons Victoria said yes. It happened on a Sunday morning in the townhouse kitchen, while rain tapped against the windows and the piano teacher's latest assignment sat on the counter beneath a grocery list. Daniel was making tea badly. Victoria was reading a grant report and pretending not to notice. You are burning water, she said. That is legally impossible. You are finding a way. He turned off the kettle, came to the table, and placed a small box beside her report. Victoria looked at it. This is either jewelry or the most alarming billing envelope of your career. Jewelry. Risky. Considered. He sat across from her, not kneeling, not performing, not turning their life into a scene. The box remained closed. Victoria, he said, I love your quiet. I love that it means thought, not permission. I love your records, your clauses, your terrible piano timing, and the way you ask whether a room is useful before you ask whether it is beautiful. Her throat tightened. I am not asking to rescue you. I am not asking to be trusted without earning it. I am asking whether you would like to build a life with me, in which every door opens from both sides. Victoria looked at the box, then at him. Once, she had thought proposals needed certainty. Now she understood they needed honesty and room to keep choosing. Yes, she said. Daniel exhaled like a man released from a deposition. She smiled. But if there is a chandelier involved, I reserve the right to leave. No chandeliers. No surprise gala. Never. No family foundation funds. That one feels pointed. It is. He opened the box. The ring was not large. A sapphire set between two small diamonds, antique, simple, and deeply blue. It looked nothing like the Whitmore diamonds. Victoria loved it immediately. She also loved that Daniel waited for her to pick it up herself. When she slid it onto her finger, she did not feel chosen in the old dangerous way. She felt accompanied. That was better. Chapter 26. The wedding was small. Victoria nearly laughed at the irony. 30 guests. No press. No society pages. No foundation donors, unless they were actual friends. Celeste came with Samuel and sat near the back. Julian attended alone, at Victoria's invitation, and behaved with such careful respect that Daniel later said the man looked like he was taking a final exam in boundaries. Eleanor did not live to see it. Victoria thought about her anyway. Not with longing. Not with resentment sharp enough to cut the day. More like one thinks about a storm that changed the landscape and is now gone. The ceremony took place in the foundation courtyard, beneath young trees planted after the renovation. Victoria wore ivory, because she liked the color and refused to let old symbolism own it. Daniel cried before she reached him. She pretended not to notice until he whispered, "This is a medical condition." "You are a lawyer," she whispered back. "Document it." Their vows were simple. Daniel promised honesty before comfort. Victoria promised presence without disappearance. No one mentioned second chances. Victoria disliked the phrase. It made life sound as if it were repeating itself. This was not a repeat. This was a different road built by a different woman. At the small dinner afterward, Julian raised a glass. Victoria had not expected him to speak. "To Victoria and Daniel," he said. "To rooms that become better because someone asks what they are for. And to the grace of being allowed to witness happiness you did not earn, but can still respect." The room went quiet. Victoria looked at him. Julian nodded once. Celeste wiped her eyes. Samuel slept through the entire toast, which Victoria considered excellent judgment. Daniel leaned toward her. That was surprisingly good. Do not encourage him. But she smiled. Chapter 27. The old gala clip resurfaced again the week after Victoria's wedding. This time, someone paired it with a photograph from the courtyard ceremony. Eleanor in lavender, humiliating her under a chandelier. Victoria years later in ivory, smiling under trees. The caption read, She lost a husband and gained a life. Victoria disliked the simplicity, but she understood why people needed it. Stories gave shape to chaos. They made harm seem survivable from the outside. They gave women language before they had plans. So she did not correct the caption publicly. Privately in her journal, she wrote, "I did not gain a life because I lost a husband. I gained a life because I stopped negotiating with people who needed me smaller." That was closer. At the foundation, the Maternal Privacy Fund expanded to 3 states. The Rural Surgical Program became a national model. Marin trained new auditors to look for emotional motives inside financial misconduct because, as she said, people steal for love, pride, revenge, and chandeliers. The ledger does not care why, but investigators should. Celeste became a strong advocate for hospital privacy policies. She still apologized sometimes, less often now, and Victoria still accepted without pretending the past had vanished. Julian became a decent father. Not perfect, decent, consistent, willing to be corrected. He dated no one publicly for years, which the society pages treated as mysterious personal growth. Victoria treated it as none of her business. Samuel grew into a bright, solemn child who liked ambulances, blueberries, and asking why adults wore uncomfortable shoes. He called Victoria Miss V because Celeste thought Aunt Victoria was too much, and Victoria agreed. Life became strange and ordinary. That was the miracle nobody made viral clips about. Chapter 28. On a quiet afternoon, Victoria visited Eleanor's grave. She went alone. The cemetery sat on a hill outside the city, old stone markers and trimmed grass beneath a pale sky. Eleanor's name was carved beside Richard's. No quote, no family motto, just dates. Victoria stood before the stone with her hands in the pockets of her green coat. "You would hate the Maternal Privacy Fund's new logo," she said. The wind moved through the trees. "You would be wrong," she added. She had not come to forgive. Not exactly. Forgiveness had become less interesting to her over time. What mattered more was whether the harm still dictated her movement. It did not. She could stand there without shaking. She could remember the sentence without becoming it. "Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made." Eleanor had meant it as exile. It became a doorway. Victoria placed a small white flower near Richard's side of the stone, then another near Eleanor's. Not because Eleanor deserved tenderness in some simple way, because Victoria no longer needed to ration tenderness as if cruelty had made it scarce. "I hope wherever you are," she said softly, "you have learned to ask before entering delivery rooms." That made her laugh. The laugh surprised her. It was not bitter. She left the cemetery under a clearing sky. Chapter 29. Years later, Victoria gave a lecture to a room full of young lawyers, social workers, and foundation directors. The title was Control Disguised as Care. She stood at the podium wearing a navy suit and the sapphire ring Daniel had given her. Her hair had a few silver strands now. She liked them. They looked earned. She did not begin with legal doctrine. She began with the sentence, "Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made." The room went still. Some knew the clip. Some did not. It did not matter. "A woman said that to me in a ballroom," Victoria continued. She meant to reduce me to what her son no longer wanted. 5 minutes later, the money trail showed that the same room had been funded by a children's foundation. That is the version people remember. She looked across the audience. But the more important lesson came later. Control rarely arrives announcing itself as control. It arrives as protection, support, family tradition, reputation management, a generous settlement, a medical agreement, a photographer in a hospital corridor, a sentence spoken for your own good. Pens moved. "Your job," Victoria said, "is to ask who benefits when someone else is asked to be quiet." She walked them through the case without names, though everyone knew enough. Foundation misuse, medical privacy, maternal coercion, governance rights, reputational laundering, the importance of preserving records before confronting powerful people. At the end, a young lawyer raised her hand. "How do you keep from becoming cynical?" Victoria smiled. "Some days I do not." The room laughed softly. She continued, "But cynicism is not protection. It is exhaustion pretending to be wisdom. Records protect. Colleagues protect. Boundaries protect. Rest protects. Humor helps. So does remembering that we do this work not because people are always good, but because harm should have fewer hiding places." After the lecture, the young lawyer approached her. "Thank you," she said, "for saying the quiet parts." Victoria gathered her notes. Quiet parts are often where the evidence is. Chapter 30. That evening, Victoria returned home to find Daniel in the kitchen with flour on his shirt and suspicion in the air. "What happened?" she asked. "I attempted bread." "Attempted? The dough and I are in negotiations." Victoria looked at the counter. The dough sat in a bowl, dense and unimpressed. "It appears to have strong counsel." "I was hoping you would say that." She laughed and kissed him. The house smelled of yeast, rain, and the lemon cleaner she liked. In the music room, the piano waited. On the mantel sat Richard's letter, a photograph from the foundation wing, and a small drawing Samuel had made of an ambulance with 12 wheels. Victoria changed clothes, came back downstairs, and helped Daniel salvage dinner. The bread was terrible. They ate it anyway with soup and too much butter. Later, she sat at the piano and played the old piece again. This time, she made only one mistake. Daniel applauded from the doorway. "Do not," she said. "I must. It is my role as supportive spouse." "Your role includes honest feedback." Honestly, the piano survived. She smiled. Outside, the city moved in its endless glittering argument with darkness. Somewhere, someone was likely being told to stay quiet for the good of a family, a company, a relationship, a name. Somewhere else, a woman was copying documents, calling a lawyer, saving a message, deciding that dignity did not require her disappearance. Victoria hoped she would find help quickly. She hoped there would be a room ready for her. And if there was not, she hoped the woman would build one. Chapter 31. Before bed, Victoria opened the drawer where she kept certain records. Not evidence needed for active cases. Those belonged in secure archives. This drawer held personal artifacts. Eleanor's first apology note. Celeste's thank you card. Julian's statement accepting responsibility. Richard's letter. A printed still from the gala clip, not of Eleanor speaking, but of Victoria 5 minutes later, black folder open, face calm, eyes fixed on the foundation table. For a long time, she had disliked that image. People said she looked powerful. She knew she had felt hollow. Now she saw something else. Not power exactly. Permission. The woman in the picture had given herself permission to stop absorbing harm quietly. She had not known where it would lead. Divorce. Court. Foundation reform. Hospital corridors. A new love. A life with ugly bread and imperfect piano. She knew only that the room had asked her to disappear, and she had opened a folder instead. Victoria placed the photograph back in the drawer. Then she closed it. No drama. No ritual. Just a drawer shutting softly in a house where she no longer had to earn her place by being easy to hurt. Upstairs, Daniel called. "Are you coming?" "Yes." She turned off the light. The room went quiet. Not the old quiet, demanded by other people's comfort. Her quiet. Chosen, spacious, and full of doors. Chapter 32. The next spring, Victoria received a letter from a woman she had never met. It arrived at the foundation in a plain envelope addressed by hand. No return name on the front. Inside was a photograph of a mother sitting beside a hospital bed, while a little boy slept with a stuffed rabbit under one arm. The note was short. "Mrs. Ashford, your privacy fund helped me stop my husband's family from putting cameras in my delivery room. Your surgical grant helped my son get here for treatment. I used to think help only counted if someone saved your whole life at once. Now I know sometimes help is one locked door, one paid hotel room, one lawyer who says you are allowed to say no. Thank you for making the room." Victoria read it twice. Then she walked to the window. Outside, spring light touched the city. People crossed the street with coffee cups, phones, flowers, bad news, good news, secrets. The world looked ordinary in the ruthless way it always did after something sacred happened quietly. Daniel found her there a few minutes later. "Good letter?" he asked. She handed it to him. He read it and said nothing for a while. Then he looked at her. "This is why." Victoria nodded. This was why the invoices mattered. Why the black folder mattered. Why she had stood under a chandelier and refused to become the abandoned woman Eleanor wanted the room to see. Not because every wound needed to become a mission. Not because suffering was noble. Victoria hated that idea. Suffering was suffering. But when power had tried to turn her pain into silence, the answer had become larger than one marriage. It became one locked door. One paid hotel room. One lawyer who said no. She placed the letter in a new frame and hung it in the staff hallway, not the donor lobby. Donors like polished outcomes. Staff deserved reminders of what their work felt like when it reached a life. At the next board meeting, someone suggested using the letter in a fundraising campaign. Victoria said no. But it is powerful, the development director said. That is why we protect it. The room accepted that. Years earlier, such a refusal would have been called difficult. Now it was policy. Later that evening, Victoria walked through the foundation wing before closing. In one consultation room, a young mother slept on the sofa while her own mother watched a baby in a carrier. In another, a lawyer reviewed hospital access forms with a woman whose hands shook every time she heard footsteps. Down the hall, a child laughed at something Samuel had left behind during a visit, a toy ambulance with one wheel missing. The building was not grand or ornamental anymore. It was useful. Victoria thought of Eleanor then. Not the woman at the end. The woman under the chandelier, certain that public humiliation could reduce another woman to an exit. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. Victoria finally understood the deepest error in that sentence. Eleanor had believed leaving was something men did to women. She had never imagined that a woman could be left in the middle of a ballroom and still choose where the story went next. Victoria turned off the hallway light. The foundation settled into night behind her, full of records, rooms, and doors that opened from the inside. Subscribe for more stories about betrayal, hidden power, and the quiet moment a woman takes her life back.